There are three essential elements of the sacrament of confession. In other words, for our confession to be valid, these three elements must be present. The first is contrition. The second is confession. And the third is satisfaction. What then is contrition? Contrition is the sorrow of heart over one's sins. Contrition is being sorrowful because one has offended God. And for this contrition to be perfect, this sorrow must arise out of love for God and not because one is afraid of God's punishment. So a sorrow that is perfect is one that arises out of love for God. When one weeps for one sin because he or she has offended God whom he loves. The second aspect is confession. Confession is the acknowledgement of one's sins before God himself. In the sacrament of confession, confession is the admission of the various ways one has offended God before a priest who is a representative of God himself. So for our confession to be valid, we have to confess our sins in number, not only in number but also in kind. In number, we mean the number of times we have committed this particular sins. Then in kind, we mean the mortal sins and the venial sins. We usually begin by confessing the mortal sins, then we proceed to the venial sins. Now the third aspect is satisfaction. In satisfaction, we have penance and absolution. Penance because our own way of making remedy of our sins, our own efforts of trying to repair the damages, the harms that our sins have caused in the society. And this penance could be by way of restitution. For someone who has stolen another person's goods, the penance could be to return what we have stolen. Or someone who has slandered his neighbor, who has said many bad things against his neighbor, the penance could be to go and say the opposite of all you have been saying before, to repair that damage you have caused your neighbor through your words. We have absolution. Absolution becomes the prayer that the priest gives. This is actually the form of the sacrament. Without this, there is no confession. So through these prayers of absolution, the penitent receives God's grace of forgiveness. God's grace of forgiveness. So before we go to confession, we need to examine ourselves and find out the various ways we have offended God. Then we ask God for forgiveness. We show that contrition. We show that sorrow. For this is important. Why don't you make a good confession? Why don't you prepare? Why don't you confess your sins worthily? And when you do that, you will truly receive God's mercy and forgiveness. May the Lord bless you.